Joining us, MS Now political analyst and Democratic strategist and pollster Cornell Belcher, MS Now legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, and founder and co-managing partner of Skybridge Capital, and former Trump White House communications director Anthony Scaramucci. His upcoming book is called All the Wrong Moves. All right, Mooch, I'm going to start with you on this. What do you think of what J.D. Vance tried to do there?
Well, I've been there, so I've done that, and so and it doesn't reflect well on me that I've been there and I've done that. But I will just say that he is not feeling good about himself. Honestly, he's got to take a shower after doing something like that, and I think this whole media tour that he's done has actually hurt him because he's trying to come across as a good guy, but everything he's saying is in the frame of hypocrisy. So. My guess is that JD does not run for president in 2028. That's going to be my prediction.
The justification, Joyce, for all of the election denialism that the president has foisted upon us and all of the doubt that he's sown within the electorate about our systems, just to justify it by saying, hey, listen, I mean, we're happy to concede elections, sure, but this is not about conceding election. It's about pointing out all of the ways in which Facebook and Instagram and Twitter censored us and therefore changed the results of the election.
This is just an old game that Republicans have played for decades, but that Donald Trump has brought to a new level. And the game is circulating false stories about voter fraud, claiming that it taints elections. That's just not true, Katie. There are studies over and over that have disproved that. But they use this mythical fraud that they build up and the fear that accompanies it to justify voter suppression measures. And that's what we're seeing happen right now. Efforts to make it more difficult for eligible American citizens to vote based on this myth of fraud. And sort of the mic drop moment here is Donald Trump flouting established constitutional rules that give control of elections to each of the states, right? Every state runs its own elections. Our friends and neighbors work the polls and participate in the vote counts. Donald Trump is trying to federalize that. He's done it in a number of ways. Of course, the most notorious one is this effort to create a federally approved list of who can vote using the citizenship myth, the notion that people who aren't citizens are voting, which just is not true yet again, but using that myth to justify creating a national list, perhaps telling the Postal Service that they can't mail ballots to people who aren't on that list. The fight will happen in the courts. The fight will happen in the states. But the law is very clear, and judges are increasingly finding Trump just can't do these things. He can't just pretend that he has authority that the Constitution does not give him in this area.
And I'm going to get to the Supreme Court decision today in a moment, but I want to get to Cornell on how effective the big lie still is. I'll put some poll numbers up. 63% of Republicans still believe 2020 was stolen from Donald Trump. That's according to some recent numbers. I had Chris Jansing, though, on last hour, and she said she was down in Georgia talking to elections officials down there, and their sense of whether these lies are still working is that they are not working as well, that people have gotten hip to the president's game and actually do have a greater amount of trust in our policies, the way we run elections state by state, than the president might give people credit for.
Well, I think there's a couple things that are happening here. One is, Katie, that number that you see, that 63% number, we see that in all of our data also, where you do have folks who are identifying as Republican. They have completely bought into the big lie. But that's the point of the big lie, right? The facts, and to a certain extent, don't matter as much. And if you say a lie long enough and you have an echo system that repeats that lie over and over again, it does begin to burn in. And that's what we've seen in data point after data point, especially with those who are identifying as Republicans. They do think the system is corrupt, and they do think that the elections are stolen and not on the up and up. That's where Republicans live in the base of their party. That's the way they can continue to ferment chaos and confusion around the election. What you at the same time you do with more independent voters, you see independent voters breaking against Republicans in a way that you haven't seen them certainly in the last presidential election. If you look at all the special elections that have happened in the off-year elections, you see independents moving away from that sort of nonsense and the chaos and the big lie. And if you look at where independent voters are right now today, you see that Democrats in the generic horse race are opening up a double-digit lead among independents. So it's cutting both ways. It's hurting them in the middle of the electorate, but it's absolutely not hurting them with their base.
Well, let's talk more about that echo. Here was Kansas Senator Roger Marshall on Meet the Press.
The issue right now is that Americans don't feel that the elections are trustworthy. No one wants their vote canceled by an illegal alien or by a dead person. And all you have to do is look at the recent elections in Los Angeles just to see the concern there as well. So I think there's real concerns, and the perception here is reality, Ryan.
Ryan did a lot of pushback after that, Ryan Nobles. I wish we could have played it for you, because what happened after that was that the senator came up short with any evidence. There just isn't any evidence to this, Mooch. There's no evidence. So you have a lot of people in the party trying to play White House spokesperson on whatever Donald Trump wants or believes or feels or needs to be true, because he can't lose anything, because he's got a problem in his ego with it. But there's just no evidence. When you look down the line, Mooch, what are you expecting for what we will experience should Republicans lose the House and maybe even the Senate as well?
Well, I mean, they're, like everyone's saying on the panel, they're going to try to do things to hurt the system, but I predict the system's going to hold, because it's still a very decentralized system. And that senator was just playing to an audience of one. That's the whole Trump narrative. And if Trump's watching that or recorded it, he doesn't want to be on the wrong side of Trump. But I believe that this is an Viktor Orban-esque like moment for the United States. I actually think we're going to be overwhelmed with anti-Republican sentiment and anti-Trump sentiment if you just look at the polling data. And that's sort of what happened to Viktor Orban. So, we're going to beat them. I guess the real problem will be, what do we do to reform the system? And I would say something somewhat optimistic. Trump has given you a template. Whatever he's doing, we have to codify and reform to protect ourselves from a future miscreant like him. And so I don't know, I'm very optimistic. I think people are sick and tired of what's going on right now.
I think I share that optimism. I think I feel like the emperor is wearing no clothes, and people are actually willing to say it. The emperor is wearing no clothes here, but maybe that optimism, hopefully it's not misplaced.
Republicans won't say it, but we would.
Yeah. Well, let me, you don't think so, Cornell? You disagree?
I don't share that optimism.
Why?
I hope Mooch is right. I hope you're right. Because what I've seen time and time again, look, let's take the Voting Rights Act, right? It's gutted. And we've had decade upon decade of people trying to make the system fairer and franchise more people and have more people political voice. And I got a lot of relatives and family in the South who have had their voice diluted and their voting power diluted. And the silence that has happened over the last couple of weeks at those hard fought for rights being diluted and washed away is very meaningful to me. So I hope you're right, but I'm not optimistic.
That's in the House. I mean, obviously, with the gerrymandering and the dilution, certainly in the House. Do you still feel that way when it comes to the Senate and to federal elections, where there are not gerrymandered districts, Cornell?
Yeah, no, but there's not one thing, right? It's not the one thing. Is a dismal tide, right? And we got to keep pushing back against the tide. Now, look, I do think we're going to have a very good election, because I think the past elections that you've seen, the special elections and the off-year elections in Virginia and New Jersey, where Democrats won by really large numbers, I think Mooch is right. I think there is a sea building, but I also think that some of that sea is being broken up by people being disenfranchised and their voices being diluted.